Welcome to the comfy zone. Make yourself at home.
The Princess in the Oak Tree Cottage. Chapter 3. Sigmund could hardly believe it when the princess, who appeared so beautiful and young, told him she had waited 300 years for him. She explained that the cottage had been enchanted to protect her, and all these years she had lived on the magic food and drink that she had shared with him on the day they met. When we met, you told me your mother had told you about me. How could that be so if you've been alone all these years? Sigmund asked Olivia. That much was true, replied Olivia, but I never could have known when it would happen. Before you and I met, before you or your parents were even born, when I was still a child, my mother prepared me for the day we would meet. I fear that she got this knowledge from the very witch who cursed my kingdom and all the people in it. How could all of this have happened so long ago? Sigmund asked. Olivia looked at the prince, knowing it must be hard to understand, and explained, Years before any of the strange events started happening, my mother met the witch while traveling through the woods. As she was traveling, she followed a sweet-smelling aroma and discovered a cabin that seemed out of place, as she knew the woods very well. She saw the front door was open and decided to enter it, checking to see if anyone was home or in need of help. Quickly, the sweetness began to decay until the whole cabin smelled like it was rotting. As she went to leave the cabin, she saw everything begin to slowly crumble, and a voice boomed as though it was inside her head. What did the voice say? Asked Sigmund. Olivia's face grew pale, and her breathing became heavy. She seemed lost in her own thoughts. At last she answered. The voice said that all things in the kingdom would decay, and all people would be lost, as the rot that had been planted in the forest would begin to spread. My mother begged the witch for the kingdom to be spared, still speaking to her as though she was in her own head. In her arrogance, the witch said she would allow me to survive, so that there would be a witness to the witch's destructive powers. But how the witch said I would survive seemed to prove that what would allow me to survive was a power greater than her own. How did she say you would survive? The prince asked. She said I would survive because of my love for you, and that you would find me in the forest where all things end. Olivia looked intently into Sigmund's forest green eyes and continued. My mother waited until she felt I was old enough to understand the gravity of what the witch had told her, and by the time she did, I had been witness to the loving kindness that she seemed to express as a mother, a wife, and a queen. I knew that the love I could see in her was real. I trusted her, and began to love the prince who would find me, even though I had never met him. When the curse took hold over the kingdom, and I slowly lost everyone I had, I knew the cottage and its magic would keep me safe, so long as I waited in it. Sigmund sat silently, digesting the story he was hearing. Over the next few years, the rot spread deeper into the kingdom, and eventually the entire land was covered in gray ash. The forest burned, destroying everything within the blackened expanse. I hid in the cottage, waiting for you. I knew you would come, and I waited. After 300 years, I think I've waited long enough, she concluded. Sigmund looked at Olivia, understanding she was telling the truth and taking it all in. His mind raced with questions. There must be a reason I found you when I did, Sigmund said softly. Recounting what had happened before he learned about Olivia's solitude in the forest, Sigmund couldn't help but think of the beast they had seen before returning to the cottage. It seemed to disappear before their eyes, leaving them with no explanation as to how it vanished in such a short amount of time or where it went. Perhaps the creature was the witch herself, suggested Sigmund. Or perhaps it was an illusion. I've always thought the people of the kingdom who seemed to change were almost like walking illusions. I've just never seen them disappear the way the beast in the forest did, replied Olivia. The prince shook his head in disbelief. Maybe it was both, and maybe neither. We'll know soon enough, I suppose. Sigmund knew that the time had come for him to take Olivia from the forest into a place she could finally be free. "Come with me to my kingdom," he said. "I can't imagine the amount of heartache and loneliness you felt in the cottage all these years. If you come with me, you'll never be alone again." Olivia gave a weak smile and nodded, but felt a deep sense of fear that she was still being pursued by the witch. "If you're ever in trouble, you have only to reach out your hand and call for me," the prince told her, smiling warmly. Olivia lifted her head and looked into the prince's eyes. She could see the sincerity behind his words, and she realized that he truly meant every word he'd spoken. She leaned her head on his shoulder as the two sat on a log in the clearing in the forest. It was then that Olivia fell asleep, exhausted after reliving the memories of her life. The prince sat silently in this moment, knowing that he was called to protect her, and that no magic could come between them. Olivia would be rescued from the enchanted forest, and no witch could stop Sigmund.